I found this guy originally on LinkedIn. I was actually going. I didn't tell him this. I'm gonna tell him now. I started searching different titles for potentially what would have been a new book for me. And I came across this guy. His name is Marcus Aurelius Anderson, and I found his book called The Gift of Adversity. And I was instantly kind of almost angry because I'm like, what a title, man. I love the title, and I think it's amazing. And I picked up his book and started reading a little bit about him. So he's a motivational speaker. He's a personal coach. He has an amazing story. He's done a TEDx speech that was very well received. Again, great story, great inspiration. I'm super excited to have him on. Marcus, thanks so much for being my guest.
Michael Alden, as I live and breathe. How are you, my friend?
I'm wonderful. It's early. It's early though. I'll get better. I learned that from Zig Ziglar. So, all right, let's just get right into it. When I found the cover of your book and I found the title, and I was like, man, what an awesome title right away. And then, again, I was searching for it because I felt as though that I've gone through adversity. But then when I read what happened to you, it was really kind of nothing, right, compared to what you've gone through. So I'm just going to kind of jump to really the beginnings of your book. 38 years old, you decide you're going to enlist in the Army. Tell us about that decision, why that happened, and how things really kind of started to almost kind of go downhill for you.
Man, yeah, that's kind of crazy. It's a bit old to get in the military, isn't it? Right? I had some people that I knew that got into the military. They had to have a waiver to get in because they were too young. Mine was the other direction. What had happened to me, Mike, is I was in Atlanta, Georgia. I was going to chiropractic school at the time, and I was married, and I'm working my tail off as a bartender. I'm taking 25 hours of doctorate levels courses at school. Just really working, not getting a lot of sleep. But in my mind, I'm doing this for my wife and for our future. And what I inadvertently did was I basically didn't take care of my marriage the way I should have. And because I made the wrong thing a priority, I lost that marriage. So we got divorced. Not long after that, my great uncle, who was a huge role model for me, passed away. He was in special forces in Vietnam. Big role model. Next to my father, he was my biggest role model. So those were two just devastating 1-2 punches that just kicked me right in the ass. And so I'm burnt out. I don't want to go to school. I'm sick of working. And at my great uncle's funeral, they have, the 21 gun salute and all that stuff. And I was like, I always wanted to join the military. It's probably too late now, but I'm going to go down and talk to the recruiter. So I went down to talk to the recruiter. I walk in and I ask him what the age limit is. He says 35. And I turn around. And I'm like, well, I'm out of here. He says, no, sit down and talk to me. And we talked for a minute. He asked me how many push-ups I can do. I'm able to do the max of push-ups out right there. I max the sit-ups out right there. And he says, okay, why are you here? You're in great shape. You're a natural leader. Why are you doing this? And I explained to him what had happened. And he said, well, I can sign a release to get you in if that's what you want to do, but you have to explain to me what you want to do with this. I said, I want to go into infantry and follow my great uncle's footsteps. And eventually he says, hey, it's your life. You can do whatever you want to do. So we signed that release, and I was off to basic training, that following January at Fort Benning. It was quite the experience.
Yeah, so we get to that point in which a lot of people when you look back on it, you might even say, man, that was a bit of a crazy decision. But I mean,
Yeah.
it makes sense. Why you did it, and you want to serve your country. You want to you wanted to kind of honor your great uncle, and that makes a lot of sense to me. But so you get to the point, and you're the 10th Infantry Mountain Division. I think that's what it's called, right? In New York?
Yeah, I'm in upstate New York at 10th Mountain Light Infantry Division. Yes, sir.
A friend of mine was an MP, and he was stationed at West Point. And I was telling him a little bit about it. He knew exactly what it was, and because he's a military guy. So all right, so you're in, and in the beginning of the book you talk about what it really takes to be in the armed forces, and the training and the ruck runs, which is essentially you're running with with all this weight on your back and stuff. And so you get to this point. You're obviously already in great shape, but you continue to even get better. And then something happens. Tell us about what happened and that story, because it's kind of weird what happened to you.
It really is. As we mentioned, upstate New York, it's about 30 miles south of the Canadian border, so it's not real warm up there, especially in the wintertime. But that's what we're designed to do. We were preparing to go into the Korengal Valley, and a lot of people don't know it, but there in the wintertime, it's very cold. There's a lot of snow. There's a lot of ice, and understanding the mountainous terrain. And that's what we specialized in up there at 10th Mountain. So as time kind of went on, we would do things outside. That's where a lot of our training was, obviously. And my hands and my feet were constantly numb, and I just attributed it to it being cold. But it got to the point where I was having a hard time moving my fingers, moving my hands. Even near the end there, when we were doing some running, my legs didn't really want to move. And I just kind of put that out of my mind because, when you're preparing to deploy, you're always thinking about, this is what my priority is. This is what I'm going to move forward with. So I just sort of ignored all these signals from my mind, from my body, rather. My mind overcame that. And then I wake up one morning, somebody's beating on my door, and I go to roll out of bed, and my body won't move. And I kind of chuckled at first. I thought, oh, well, I'm pretty sore. Maybe that's why I can't move. And then I keep trying to roll, and nothing else will articulate. Just my neck moves a little bit. And that's when I start to realize that there's a bigger problem here than just having, a little bit of a sore body. And when they rushed me to the hospital, they found out that I'd ruptured a disc in my neck. And that disc was compressing my spinal cord and essentially choking the life out of me. So that's why they sent me down there real fast, trying to save my life.
And so the actual injury itself was you shattered your like a part of your spine, or?
Yeah, the disc ruptured, and it's almost like an explosion. So when it pushed back into my spinal cord, it was at the C5 level. That's the same vertebral level where Christopher Reeve was actually paralyzed at. So when it compressed like that, it wasn't allowing any cerebral spinal fluid to go out through the rest of my body. But the spine, the actual spinal cord itself is very, very delicate. It's like pieces of silk. So it's almost like having a fire hose that has somebody stepping their foot on it. So while the water tries to come out, it can't come out, and there's a lot of compression, and it created permanent nerve damage, and that was what the big problem was. That's why my body wouldn't move.
Yeah, I've had some others that have been on the podcast. I had Chris Norton on. I saw a great video of his when his girlfriend helped him get out of a wheelchair, and he walked across stage on a graduation. And I also had a young kid by the name of Casey Adams who broke his neck. Wasn't as severe. And when I was talking to them too, and you describe it in your book, but tell us, if you could, so you rushed into the ER, you realized that something's wrong. Like, what's really going through your head when you're sitting there? You're like, am I going to live? And then tell us what happened after that surgery.
Well, the thing that was silly is I was still so focused on deploying. Everything that we had done up to that point, every drop of water, every bite of food, every PT session I did was with the intent of deploying. So I'm actually on the gurney. They're rushing me in. And in my mind, I'm thinking, man, I hope this doesn't take very long. I hope they can just give me a shot or whatever, because I have to get back because we're going to deploy soon. So while that sounds kind of silly, that was still my kind of warrior mindset. Once they went in and they did the MRI, they come back and they say, well, we're going to prep you. And the NCO that I had that was with me, he says, prepping for what exactly? And she said, well, for surgery, silly. And that's when I realized that something big was going on. I've been in a hospital before for like stitches and bumps and bruises, but never for a big operation like that. Go down to the operating room. There's, almost a dozen people down there waiting for me. And that's scary, because if it takes that many people to make sure that you live, something big's about to happen. So they rushed me in there, they put me under, and they put the mask on me and say, start counting down from 100. And I realized at that point it's completely out of my hands. So I just start counting down. And there was a moment in time where it was just very, very cold and very, very dark. And it seemed like I was there for a long time. And all of a sudden I came out of it and I'm in an ICU. I find out later on, the doctor comes in and he says, you had us worried there for a minute. And I thought, why am you worried? I'm the guy that's under the knife. I should be worried. He said, yeah, we lost you there a couple of times. You died on us, but we brought you back. So congratulations, you get to tell the tale, and you've got a second chance at life now. So that was pretty. I couldn't really. I kept listening. I was like, what? Are you really? Is that what happened? He said, yep, that's what happened. So it was that really was a kick in the ass, as you can imagine.
Yeah, it's interesting too when you tell in the story when you had a nurse come into your room and sit down and she starts kind of asking you all these questions about, what was it like, and you were still kind of you weren't really aware of what had happened, and you say in the book that what, I got to be honest, I didn't see anything, right? You didn't see a big white light, you didn't see your family or any of that stuff. You're right. I mean that was your experience, right?
That absolutely was. And, I talk about that in the book too. I respect everybody's, beliefs and ideas about religion or lack of religion or whatever the case may be. And I've talked to different people that have had experiences and they have seen lights and they have seen all these amazing things. But for me, I would rather tell you the truth and disappoint you with that than entertain you with some amazing fabricated lie that is entertaining but not necessarily true. So that's what happened to me, and that's all I can really say about that. I've had people that say, well, that means that, you should do this or you should do that. Or other people that have said, well, because you didn't see anything, that there's nothing that needs to be worked on. But what it did for me is it gave me a tremendous amount of urgency in my life that I have now.
Yeah. In a second, I want to talk to you about, kind of the post recovery, and really that's when the things started to really kind of click for you and really how this book started. So folks, we've been on with Marcus Aurelius Anderson. He wrote the book, The Gift of Adversity, Overcoming Paralysis and Pain to Find Purpose. You can find it on Amazon. You can also find him on Twitter. It's at the and then one real Marcus on Twitter. He's also on Instagram at Marcus Aurelius Anderson. You can find him his website as well, Marcus Aurelius Anderson. If you're maybe a CEO or maybe you're the head of an organization and you're looking for somebody to come in and really inspire your team. He does keynote speeches. He's also doing a lot of personal coaching for people. He's been through obviously his book, The Gift of Adversity. I love the title, love the book, and if you heard me from the beginning, I was looking for a title for a potential new book for me, and Marcus stole it from me. So I'm jealous, but it's a great book. It's a great story, and you can also, by the way, his TEDx speech. You can just go on YouTube and you can find that as well. It's a great speech, and he tells kind of a lot of the stories in there and why adversity really is a gift. So the title of your book, The Gift of Adversity. Why is adversity truly a gift? And before you answer, I opened my first book, Ask More, Get More, with the line, "Thank God I was born poor," and I look at that as a gift as well of adversity. But your adversity was, we're talking about mortality here. Why is adversity really a gift, and why, and how can people use it to their advantage?
It's an interesting concept because I've had a lot of people. I'll post something on LinkedIn, for example, and people will kind of come at me sideways and say things like, how can you say that? It doesn't make any sense. But those of us that have faced any sort of adversity, and, adversity is relative.
I tell those people to fuck off, by the way, just so you know.
Yeah, that's, I try to do it professionally as much as I can.
No, not me.
But the idea is, if we've been through anything, if you've overcome anything in your life, whether it be, hardship from the weather or working out or whatever it is, you understand that hardship that you face is what strengthens you. It's what makes you stronger. And, Mike, both of us have a huge amount of strength that's reservoir within us. But if we don't have something that's going to push us, it's going to spur us on to find that strength, we will never even come close to touching it. And that's what adversity does. Adversity kicks you in the ass and it forces you to find what makes you better. It forces you to up your game, and it makes you better in the process, because if you don't have that, you're just going to wallow in this kind of state of mediocrity, and you're never going to find out how great you really are.
Yeah, it really is a great point. I had Dan Coyle on. He wrote the book, The Talent Code, and he talks about this concept called deep practice as it relates to athletics and being great in as an athlete, and not just there, but just in life in general. And it's really interesting where, when you're living through it, right? Like, it's really hard to say, oh, this is going to be, man, it's going to make me so much stronger. Like when you're going through that, when you're, okay, so just let's relate it to your life. So now you're post-surgery, you're paralyzed, and you literally have to learn everything all over again. You have to walk up those 3 steps that you talk about in your rehabilitation. And you had some dark moments, right? It's not easy to find the positive in just absolute hell, is it?
It's not, and that's the absolute reason why it's so important to have that mindset now before it befalls you. Because if you don't start thinking about it at the time, in the heat of battle, you're not going to be able to have a philosophical ideal of it. You're going to be very much, in this reactionary phase, or scared and afraid to do anything. And I've done martial arts my whole life, so I already knew a lot of these things. But again, just like you said, when something tragic befalls you, it really makes you figure out what the hell you're made of and what you really want to do. And that's what happened to me, is I realized that, I was suicidal there for a while. If I was able to actually take my own life, I probably would have. Now, in hindsight, clearly, I'm very happy that I didn't do that. But when you're lying there and you're 40 years old and you turn 40 years old in the bed and you're told you're never going to walk again, it's a big wake up call, and it makes you realize what's really important and what's not important.
Yeah, and it's also too, when I think about again, you do a great job of really kind of describing what's going on in the very the moments leading up into the surgery, and I was thinking about, it's like you were kind of all alone too, right? I mean, you had a commanding officer. I'm not a military guy. I think that might be the right term. You did have at least somebody there, but you didn't have any family there. You were in a different place, not where you're from, and that. I mean, did you think about that when that was happening?
I really didn't. Everything was happening so fast. Yeah. And the other thing was, I was so, I don't want to say arrogant, but I was so, I didn't want to tell my family what was going on. Like, right. I told them that I was going in for surgery, but I tried to make light of it and say that it was not a big deal, that I should be fine.
Because you were in that military state of mind, right? Like you said, that warrior, you were still in that warrior mode, right?
Yeah, I was very much kind of the stoic. I'm like, well, you know what? I'm going to just shrug this off and I'll be back running, next week. And again, even if I were to tell my family what happened, the last thing I want to have is my mom and my dad next to me, just crying, watching me in a bed, not able to move. That's almost worse. So while it may have seemed kind of selfish to think of it like that, that was kind of the way my mindset was. And I figured, if I'm going to get through this, I'm going to have to get through it pretty much by myself. And I'm that much more strong for it.
Now, you had mentioned, the mindset, and you spend a lot of time in your book, talking about, how to properly train your mind, and you also talk about, martial arts and how it's been, was a blessing for you. So for those people who maybe don't have the martial arts background, they've never been in the military, they're just your kind of average everyday citizen. How would you suggest? Other than picking up your book, The Gift of Adversity, how does someone go about, training their mind to almost prepare for the worst, right? It's kind of a weird way. I mean, I think like that myself, but and it's hard to do that and not be negative. Like, how do you do that? And what sort of advice would you give to somebody to start training their brain properly?
It's the best way I can say it is to just start with like very small, like micro adversities. Do something as small as taking the stairs instead of taking the elevator, or doing something as simple as saying, you know what, I'm going to eat lunch at 2:00. Actually, I'm going to wait until 2:15 to do it. And what happens is eventually you start building up this knowledge, this resolve in yourself, when you start realizing, you know what, I could probably wait until 2:30 to eat. I could probably wait until 3:00 to eat. It's cold outside, but you know what, it could be worse. So by taking these small steps like that, and even having a conversation with somebody that you don't necessarily agree with their viewpoint, by sitting there and listening to what they have to say and understanding the potential lesson within that, that's what allows you to start developing this confidence in yourself, because that's what it really is. Understanding that you are stronger than what you give yourself credit for, and that you're not made out of porcelain, and that if you fall down, you can just stand up and dust yourself off and keep moving forward. And that's what's going to happen in business or life or love or anything. So it's an important skill set to have, and it's becoming less and less, common today.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I talk a little bit about, actually a lot about that, that methodology and 5% more of those small progressive steps and whatever it is you're trying to do. You every day you just kind of compound on it, so you get a little bit better. That makes a lot of sense, folks. We are on with Marcus Aurelius Anderson. I'm going to ask him about his actual name in a second, because I got to be honest with you, I didn't know who Marcus Aurelius was until I saw the movie The Gladiator. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. He's the author, again, The Gift of Adversity: Overcoming Paralysis and Pain to Find Purpose. You can find his book on Amazon. Love the title, love the book. He's got an amazing story. Here it is right there, if I'm showing it to people that are on Facebook. Also, again, if you are, looking for some additional motivation, you can find him at MarcusAureliusAnderson.com. You go to his website. He does do keynote speaks. He does do a lot of personal coaching, one-on-one coaching with people. You can find his TEDx speech on YouTube. Just Google Marcus Aurelius Anderson. He's also on Instagram at Marcus Aurelius Anderson, Twitter, #1 Real Marcus. Okay, so your name, Marcus Aurelius Anderson. I asked you before we went live, is that your real name? And you said, yes, it is. Tell us about that and what it's like to have a name like that. Because I didn't think it was real. I didn't think it was real, but apparently it is. Tell us about that.
That's the thing. I mean, I never use that name, the full name, because, it's an impossible name to live up to. And if you're a little boy, you're 8 years old, and, your granddad introduces you to somebody and says, hey, this is Marcus Aurelius Anderson. I can't fathom it, but I see the adults' faces. I see them like, oh, Marcus Aurelius. And so it's something kind of interesting. It's almost like the boy named Sue, where they give you a name like that and it forces you to be, almost worthy of it. So while the name is impossible to live up to, every day I try to endeavor to be worthy of such a moniker. And I didn't really use the name, obviously, until after I was injured. And then I realized that I feel like I'm not strong enough to be, as great as Marcus Aurelius, obviously, but I feel that it's a name that I can at least try to carry a little bit of.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like you said, I mean, you're like, wow. It's just like, I mean, it almost puts like this weird pressure on you. I want to kind of switch gears. I want to ask you something that's kind of a bit selfish on my end, but this is more kind of like on the business side. So the TEDx thing. A lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs listen to this. I've had a ton of authors on, and I've actually submitted myself to TEDx, a couple TEDx's, and have been declined and denied, but it's just the beginning. So tell us, how does that work? So if someone has a great story that they want to share with TEDx, how did you do that, and how would you, what sort of advice would you give others that might want to do that as well?
Yeah, I'm asked that question a lot, and it's an important question, and it's interesting because all I did was I just went to TED.com. I went to their website and I looked for TED Talks that were in my area, and I was turned down, twice. I applied for 3 of them. But the thing that you have to take a look at is you have to find, like they say on TED, is you have to have an idea we're spreading. But the other thing is, if you can find an event that's near you and an event that will actually have a theme that's out there, that gives you a better idea of what you could base your talk about. So, for example, there were 2 that were in Texas that I wanted to do, but then their themes were IT based. So, they sent me back this stuff like they did you, and they said, hey, your story is compelling, but it's just not a good fit for what we're doing.
Right.
But then luckily, the people in Columbia, Missouri, they were happy with my story, and we talked for a little bit, and I was actually lucky enough to be the first person booked for that event. And I was also the very first speaker on the docket that evening. So I was, lucky enough to be the first speaker. So I had the audience when they were fresh and they were excited, and, standing in front of 1,000 people gives you a lot of energy. Yeah.
And it's a great speech. And when I was watching it, and they're all like this, and I was thinking about, so you're on stage and it's like eerily quiet, right? They're not standing up and clapping for you in the middle of your. What's that like? Because I've given speeches, I'm sure you have as well, where you can kind of read the crowd a little bit better. What's that environment like? Is it's dark and it seems like you can't really see people in there? Is it hard to give that type of speech when you're not really able to read the crowd?
Yeah, I speak a lot, and I'm very much the way you are, where I want to see the crowd because I want to be able to react to them. And there's times when you're giving a speech and you'll see somebody that shakes their head because they may or may not agree with what you're saying, but you still, soldier on. With the TEDx talk, there's so many lights and there's so much stuff that's going on. It's really difficult to see the crowd, so you can see the front row. So I just try to connect with them as much as I can, and I just try to go out there and get the best performance. But like you say, once I, say my closing statement and I bow, I do get the applause, and it is gratifying, but it is eerily quiet. And TED, they want you to stay on that red dot.
Right.
They don't want you to move away from it. And as you can see, there were a couple times with my movement, and because I still got nerve damage in my hands and my feet, I was still, the one thing I didn't want to do is I don't want to go out there and I don't want to fall down. So, and the same thing, even with the clicker, the clicker, it was hard for me to feel it under my thumb. So I'm trying to really, get the movement in my thumb to get the the next slide to go through. But that's what we do as professionals. We're prepared. We're ready to go. If you don't have that talk down like the back of your hand, you probably shouldn't be up there, right?
Exactly. So how is it? I don't want to spend like a whole time on TEDx, but so from a branding perspective, I know that so I have Mel Robbins coming on. She wrote the 5-second rule, and and actually I met her on a plane. That's how the whole thing happened. But so
Wow.
how has it been? I didn't, I was sitting right next to her. I didn't know who she was until we started talking. But how is that? How is the TEDx speech worked for you as far as your branding? Did you notice an uptick in activity and people reaching out to you? How did that? Do you notice that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when I got out of the military, I started speaking, I started doing other things, and I've always had a book in mind, but I was having a hard time getting it all together. And as a matter of fact, I was halfway through the book, the writing process of it, when I was offered the TEDx. So then that kind of derailed me a little bit from writing. But the beauty of it was a lot of the stuff that I had in the book, I was able to put into my TEDx talk. So the people that like the TEDx talk will love the book. Having said all that, it knocks probably, 3 or 4 years of exposure off of the necessity for you. So you get this huge jump. It's a huge, it helps you springboard into so many other things. And I get, emails and DMs from people all over the world that, tell me, hey, I saw your TEDx talk and, my friend, it changed his life, or I had a friend that was thinking about committing suicide, or I have a friend who's got this victim mentality and they're complaining about how bad their life is. And then they see that, and all of a sudden now it's that one thing that they needed to kind of get that aha moment and kind of slap them out of that, that mediocrity that most people are falling asleep in today.
Yeah, it's got to feel good, right? When you get those. I mean, I get here and there, I'll send, someone will send me same thing, a DM or whatever, and I even have personal friends that'll say, hey, Mike, I saw what you said, and it doesn't make you feel good, right? I mean, there's a lot of times we're not doing this for money, right? And it's just like, all right, that's better, right?
That's exactly it. I mean, that's incredibly edifying, and there's, you can't put a price on that. I mean, and they say, if you can change one person's life with your speech, then, you've done your job. But as far as I'm concerned, if I can't change, thousands of people's lives with my speech, then I haven't done my job correctly, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so I want to ask you another business-related question as it relates to your book. So you went the self-publishing route, right? Correct?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so did you when you say you write the book, did you pursue traditional publishers? What was that process like for you, and what made you decide that the self-publishing was the best route?
As a unknown first-time author, I had a couple of people that talked to me, and they gave me a small potential deal. But what I found was both of them, once I signed the rights over to my story, I didn't have any control over them. Right. And the other thing I found was, once I did that, because I had one of the publishers that said, your story's really great and we like it, but we would like to put a love interest in it, or we would like to do this. And I was very matter of fact, and I said, well, there really wasn't a love interest in this. This was pretty much just like my story the way it is. And they said, well, we think that we would have a larger demographic if we could put like a love interest in there. And the other thing too is now you're incredibly established. You have so many books and you are phenomenal at what you do. But for me, as a young author, I would still have to develop my platform. I would still have to develop my audience. I would still have to do all the legwork. I would still have to try to find interviews and find places to sell the book and to move it on my own. So to spend that kind of, I'm sorry, not to spend that kind of money, but to have that small amount of money that I was making by comparison to what I could as a self-published author, when I go out there and now when I sell a book, I'm able to reach the people that I need to. And instead of getting like a small portion of it, I get more of a lion's share by comparison. So now perhaps by my second book, by the time I'm more established, maybe I'll go the traditional route. But as for right now, the self-published route was the best one, and it was the easiest one for me to be able to get that material out there, especially with the TED Talk coming out, because you have to strike while the pan is hot, as it were.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you went over that, because I have a lot of people that do reach out to me or send me books, and a lot of business people and entrepreneurs that are listening to this are thinking about writing a book, or maybe they've written a book. And I actually have one coming out called Bestseller Secrets. I'm not trying to pitch that, but what I think a lot of people, and I know that you're going through it now, is a lot of people don't understand, man. So you write a great book, you tell your story, it feels great, you're inspiring people, but it's hard marketing a book, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and people just think that, hey, like I said, young authors, they think that, hey, I wrote a book and now I just sit back and I just get all these residuals. It's like, well, no, it. And even if you're in a traditional, in a brick and mortar environment, Barnes and Noble is pretty much the only game in town right now, and
Right.
about 80% of the book sales are done online now. So some people will actually go into a place and see a book, they'll look through it, and then they'll get on their phone, they'll order it right there from somewhere else because they can save money doing it. So by going through a publishing, something like that and something that can go on Amazon, that made it easier for me. Also, let's be honest, they drop ship. So when people buy the book, I don't get like an email that says, hey, now you have to have one of your people go through and they have to mail it and they have to do all this other stuff. That's all taken care of. They print it on demand. They send it out for me. And then at the end of the month, I have my, money in my account and everybody wins.
Yeah, I think it's a great option. So I'm glad you brought it up. I've never really talked to anybody in detail about it. What is it called? It's called Create a Space, right? Is that what it's called?
Create Space, and that's owned by Amazon. And there are other ways that you can go about it. And, there are a lot of possibilities for authors. I like to think that my book is good, but, compared to a person like yourself or somebody else that's much more established than me, they're going to have a much bigger audience. So looking at your sales is one thing, but looking at the amount of impact that you can make is what I'm trying to do as well. So I'm trying to find that medium where, talking to people like you and learning as much as I can is what's going to help me do that.
Yeah, well, again, it's a great book. Again, folks, we're on with Marcus Aurelius Anderson. He wrote the book, The Gift of Adversity. Again, I found it when I was just searching for a title for what was potentially going to be another book for me. He just ruined my dreams. He just crushed them. I love the title, The Gift of Adversity, Overcoming Paralysis and Pain to Find Purpose. You can find it on Amazon. It's a great read. It's a quick read. The story is inspiring. And you can also find his TEDx speech on YouTube. You can find him on his website, marcusaureliusanderson.com. He is a keynote speaker. He's a motivational speaker. He does do some personal one-on-one coaching as well. When I think about adversity, again, I talk about growing up poor, but when you're faced with your own mortality, none of that stuff really matters. And he talks a lot about in the book and how to really program your mind and how to really truly understand that mindset. And I love the honesty too, because, in fact, I was skimming through it. At one point I underlined, and I'm going to look at it real quick. He says, I don't care who you are, no one can stay continually positive when they're going through the hardest event in their life. And this is not the overarching theme of the book, but I just love the honesty in the candor in his book because it's just the reality. You know what I mean? Life is hard, but adversity builds strength. So, again, if you want some more information, you can, find all those places. And by the way, listen, if you're listening right now, if you're watching right now, share this, if you're on Facebook right now, share this. If you're listening on YouTube, if you're listening on iTunes or wherever else, if you're on my website, please share this. I think this can definitely inspire. His story can definitely inspire a lot of people. And, I have some friends. One of my good friends was paralyzed, and he's not able to walk again. And his story, Marcus's story about what he had to do to become upright again is truly remarkable. So, Marcus, running out of time, let me ask you, do you have any last words of wisdom or something that you have learned throughout your journey that a lot of people can maybe just take from it and apply in their day-to-day lives on really what they can do to live a happier, healthier life?
I think that touching on adversity is a good place to do here, and I can elaborate a little bit more. It's an inevitability. It's always going to be there. In life, we're always going to run into it. So it's important to have that mindset before we run into it. As I said before, adversity forces you to drop everything else you're doing to give it your full, undivided attention. It shows up at the most inopportune times without apology. It doesn't give a damn about what you want. It doesn't really care about your emotions. And it doesn't take no for an answer. It forces you to up your game and play at a higher level. It never lets you coast or do just enough to get by. And it knows your full potential even when you do not, which is why it kicks you in the ass whenever you try to give half-hearted effort. Mike, the reality is this. Adversity offers you no other option. And when there's no other choice, then the choice is simple.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love it. It's a great book, great story. Again, we've been on with Marcus Aurelius Anderson. If you pick up his book, it's definitely going to inspire you. And again, you probably have somebody in your life that could use this book and understand that, you know what, man, you may be going through some tough times. Your life may feel like it's difficult. And, you know, I had Les Brown on the podcast, and one of the things he said with me, and I don't always give him credit for this, but he said, you know, it's the struggle that creates life. And the gift of adversity truly can be used to your advantage. So again, pick up the book. It's on Amazon. Great story. Marcus, thank you so much for being my guest. My name is Michael Alden, and we'll see you soon.